Just might make a motion to approve the consent agenda. Not to be released, yeah.
Good evening, everybody. Today's Monday, August 23rd at 6:30.
It says not
It's
to
time for the
release,
Board of
so we don't
Selectmen,
have to
Highway and Cemetery Commissioners meeting. First order of business, as always, we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Mr. Joseph is on the phone.
Yep. Mr. Joseph is on the phone. Paul, could you please identify yourself?
Paul Joseph.
Thank you, Paul. Mr. Sullivan.
Mr. Chair, before we get started, I know I speak on behalf of the board and townspeople. Recently, Willie Kozlowski passed. Louis donated almost 3 decades of his life to the town, Board of Health agent. I know I speak for the board. We send our sympathies to his family. And also on another sad note, our town clerk, Laurie Smith's father, passed. Anybody knows Laurie and her family, wonderful family. Jack was a great man, a true gentleman. Never had a bad word to say about anybody. And I know I speak for all. We send our sympathies to Laurie and her family.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Yeah, they will be missed. Thank you for that. Item 2, we have a consent agenda, quite a long consent agenda. Board members?
Mr. Chair, make a motion that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Motion by Mr. Sullivan.
Second.
Second by Mr. Sigenovich. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor? Oh, wait, roll call. Oh, we got Paul. Roll call vote, please.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Terry Sigenovich, aye.
Paul Conso.
Yep, go ahead, Paul.
Paul Joseph, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Joe Marcy, aye. Unanimous.
Paul Joseph, aye.
Thank you.
Twice. 6-0.
Item 3, Town Administrator's Report. Jonathan.
Mr. Chairman, in the interest of time for this meeting agenda, most of the things I would discuss will be discussed later on the agenda and in executive, so
Okay.
I would recommend we just move forward from there.
Okay. All right, sounds good.
Work for you?
Does. I had a few follow-up items, but we can discuss
We'll
later.
follow them up.
Oh, about, I had a resident ask about we had we had to use a outside building inspector, and they wanted to know if that matter was closed, and if we have to keep using them.
The permit has been issued by the outside building inspector. I don't believe as of today it was picked up. It was not as of last week when I went on vacation.
He picked it up last week.
Okay, so
it
that
was
matter's
picked up.
closed?
It's all
Wonderful.
set.
Wonderful.
Mr. Chair,
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan.
I know it doesn't technically fall on us, but it did because town council was engaged. Did the matter get resolved at the appellate tax board, Mr. Administrator?
The matter at the appellate tax board was found in favor of the town, so it's resolved. I believe that there is the right to appeal at some point.
But we have one at this point.
We have one that's been, yes, correct.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. We just had that's held up from last time. All right, thank you. Next, item 4, license and permits. We have Whiskey Rocks, Inc., 414 Airport Road. They're looking for a common vic license, orchestra and entertainment license. I believe, yep, she's here. Come on.
So this is not a public hearing, right? It's just a
No.
license?
It's license. How's it going? Please identify yourself and why we're here.
My name is Jessica Valby. I'm the managing partner for Whiskey Rocks, which is going to be at 4 Airport Road in Dudley. We have obtained our liquor license, all liquor license through the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and we have applied for our common victualer's license. I believe the application is with you gentlemen.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Sullivan.
good evening. Thank you for coming in.
My pleasure.
Like to give us a little update on your business before we take the vote, or how's everything progressing? You have a
Right now, there's some holes in the ground. No, at this point, we are working on cutting and pulling up concrete to lay plumbing and electrical lines underneath the floor. It's a slow, methodical work in progress.
Okay. I know people are asking, because
It's painful.
you've came in a couple of times, so people want to know.
Yeah, we're hoping for mid-October. Once, really, I mean, the long and the short of it is, once we get the floor open, then we can actually start working. So there's a lot of back-end stuff to do to be able to actually do the work.
Perfect, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Awesome. Thanks, Jessica. Board members?
Mr. Chair, make a motion to grant Whiskey Rocks, Inc., 414 Airport Road, a common victual license, orchestra and entertainment license.
Motion by Mr. Sullivan, seconded by Mr. Johnson. Discussion. Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Paul?
Paul Joseph, aye.
Carrie Singanevich, aye.
John Marcy, aye, unanimous. And we'll sign that.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. All right. Item 5, we have a public hearing. We have the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission, otherwise known as CMRPC, is a fiscal year 21 Community Development Block Grant application.
Mr. Chairman, this is something that I would have otherwise been updating you on myself, but we'll save the time and go right to Mr. Lowe, who is
We will. So before we do that, I'm going to open the public hearing at 6:40 PM. Okay. Come on up. Just identify yourself for everybody, please.
My name is Andrew Lowe. I'm with the Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission. And thank you to the chairman for opening the hearing. And just for the folks who don't know, CMRPC is the state-designated regional planning entity for the southern two-thirds of Worcester County, including 40 municipalities, including Dudley. So I'm here tonight, and I should say there's a sign-in sheet for this hearing that if folks wouldn't mind signing in, it's over here. There's one copy here and one copy with the board. And there's also a handout that I'll be essentially using as an outline for this presentation. Handouts are over on that side for folks who are here in person. So the purpose of the public hearing, this is a presentation and discussion of the 2021 Community Development Block Grant application. And at the end of the hearing, I will ask the Board of Selectmen to authorize submission of that application by CMRPC on the town's behalf. Just a little bit of background, and I know the board is familiar with this, but I'll go through it pretty quickly. So the CDBG program, this is federal HUD money that comes to the Massachusetts Department of Housing and Community Development, and they grant that money out on a competitive basis to smaller communities. The large communities get this money directly from the feds automatically every year. So for communities under 50,000, comes through the state. The application is capped at $800,000 for a single town. Typically, there's a limit in any 2-year period of $1.35 million. That has been waived this year because of the pandemic. So again, this is a competitive grant program. It has an 18-month performance period if awarded. So what projects are being planned for the application this year? There are 2 activities that I've been working with the town staff to develop for this application. So the first of these is the First Avenue infrastructure project. This would be First Avenue between Brandon Road and George Street. And that's a project that has come out of the Jericho-Brandon infrastructure plan, which I know you're all familiar with, having been here a couple of times to talk about in the last year. So that was a planning study that was done really for a good chunk of eastern Dudley to look at infrastructure conditions and identify areas that needed some infrastructure upgrades and also were promising for various grant programs. So this is one of the projects coming out of that. It would be the first step of implementing that plan. And so the project itself would involve both design and construction of infrastructure improvements in that area. It would include new water main, some sewer repairs, and some limited pavement and pedestrian improvements as well, and a little bit of drainage-related improvements, but those would be surface drainage improvements. And I should say that looking at the budget that you see on the handout, the budget for the First Avenue project and then the housing rehab one below, those numbers are transposed. So the projected budget, and this may move a little bit as we get a finalized scope of work and cost estimate, but we're looking at about $578,000 for that project. It's a higher number than we expected coming into this, but with the pandemic, as many of you know, the prices for materials have gone up pretty dramatically in the past year. By the time this would be funded, perhaps they will have come down, but not knowing that, this is the number that we're working with right now. So the second activity in the application would be the housing rehab program. So this one would actually continue an activity that you're currently partnering with the town of Millbury in under an FY20 grant that they were the lead community for. So this would be to get some additional resources to extend that activity. So housing rehab is assistance for eligible low to moderate income homeowners in town so that they can make code mandated repairs and other home improvements. And this one, if funded, would be implemented by CMRPC's partners out at the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. They have a whole team of about 5 or 6 people who just do housing rehab. Paperwork essentially to get people, eligible projects identified and moving. The actual work would be done by private contractors who are pre-qualified to help through the program. So this one would be approximately 4 units of assistance. Kind of like with the First Avenue project, we're finding that costs have gone up, so that, the money doesn't quite go as far as it did before. Grant admin would be the remainder of the application, and we would be looking at an application right up to the $800,000 limit in this year's program. So how did we arrive at these 2 projects? This has really been part of a 2 or 3 year effort here. So as the board will know, the town received one of these grants as part of FY 2019. That included 2 planning studies, the Jericho and Brandon infrastructure one that I just referenced, as well as the town's ADA accessibility plan. So, the town's working group has met about 6 times as part of those grants. I've been before the board here several times. The planning board held a community development strategy forum to try to identify 5 to 7 years worth of priorities based on past planning. And we have had project-specific outreach activities too, like the 2 events that were held here for the Jericho and Brandon plan. We've had media coverage, postings, et cetera. So for this particular application, coming out of the previous 2 grants, including the one with Millbury, the town's working group has held a couple of meetings, and I'm here tonight, and there's also been some media coverage and social media coverage of the projects that we're considering. So application timing, this year's application cycle is due September 10th. Typically these are due in March. It's been about 18 months since the last one was due. Originally they told us they would combine 2 grant cycles and make it due next March, but then they reversed course and suddenly gave us a September deadline. So if successful, we expect awards would be announced around January. And that's kind of the quick summary of the application we've been developing. And at this point, I would note that there's a proposed motion here, which would be to support and approve the submission of an FY21 CDBG application, including the activities as presented today, with allowance for minor budget or program adjustments, and to authorize the chair and the town administrator and financial staff to sign documents required for the application. So I'm happy to take questions from the board or from others.
Board members? Stephen?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Thank you for your work. I know you guys have been working with our staff and the planning board, and really appreciate it. So just for a point of reference kind of thing, for people at home, if they weren't listening or if they call, the housing rehab program, you touched on it very briefly. It's done through an authorized contractor, right? That's already, so it'd be similar to like Mass Save. If I want to do Mass Save, you can't just pick some insulation guy off the street. You have to use someone that Mass Save is already trained up and they know they can do it right.
Exactly. So our colleagues at the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, who are the ones who are implementing your shared program with the town of Millbury right now, they have a program for pre-identifying qualified contractors. It's open to anybody who has the appropriate licensing and bonding requirements. And so the way it works is Pioneer Valley would, for folks who meet the program eligibility criteria, they'll send their inspector out to take a look at the home. They'll identify any code issues. They'll listen to the homeowner about any other issues that they may want to see addressed. They'll prepare a specification, and they'll put it out to bid to our list of pre-qualified contractors. So at that point, the homeowner gets to either choose the low bidder or a different bidder if they like, but then they would have to pay the difference between those two. So it is actually a private agreement between the homeowner and the contractor, but the homeowner will also need to have an agreement with the town to make sure that the funding can go through.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, as Andrew mentioned, we had a big outpouring of support for this. A lot of people were interested in housing rehabilitation program. And then COVID kind of slowed everything down, and we just recently have got the momentum back on the first grant round. So when they moved the deadline back on the second grant, it was still people that hadn't been served from the first one that were interested in the program, so it was a natural, we pretty much assumed the board would be in support of extending that to people who would get it through the first round of grant choices.
Yeah, just to echo what John said, I believe we had almost 40 folks who submitted pre-applications as part, just from Dudley folks, as part of that joint application with Millbury. There have been a handful of folks who've submitted pre-applications since then. So based on the amount of funding that's available in the current grant with Millbury, we thought, that's just not going to be enough money to meet the demand. So we thought it was a good idea and a good opportunity here to at least go for a few units worth of assistance to try to keep the momentum of the program going forward.
So how do people know about this? How do they find out about it? The 40 people, is it just from the town, or do you reach out to people in the area?
So we have done a little bit of outreach. Michelle helped recently. Some of the pre-application materials and some program information has been put out on the town's website and on the town's Facebook over the last few weeks.
Great.
And that was both with an eye towards, folks who maybe could be helped in the current program if money stretches far enough, or if the town seeks and is awarded a new grant as well. So I should say the people who put their name into the hat as part of the last application, we did a lottery to select those folks
Good.
back in, I think it was June. So Pioneer Valley has been reaching out to them kind of in order of the lottery. Some of those folks, will never go forward in this. They've moved, they've already done the work, couldn't wait for it and that kind of a thing. But there is a list out there. But there's a good chance that we'll, between the current grant or a subsequent grant, that we could reach folks who are still interested now who haven't even put their pre-application in.
Okay, I think the feedback we got from the last time was a lot of people, I didn't know about it, so that's why, that was the genesis of my question.
So we had, Mr. Chairman, when we had that initial meeting, after we had put it in the newspaper, we advertised it in social media, put it on cable access, we talked about it. The senior center was filled with people who were interested in it.
Perfect.
And those people that weren't successful in the first grant round, to the extent that the money, as far as the money goes, we're gonna go back to those people who showed an initial interest and see
Wonderful.
if we can serve them properly too.
Fantastic. Anything? Carrie?
No, I'm just,
Paul, any feedback?
Oh, I'm okay on this one.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, I just
Mr.
want to state
Steve.
before Andrew steps down, this will help to allay some of the fears that feedback. I know Mr. Root has gotten some, that people think passage of the Stevens Linen Mill project is going to impact the people that may have like a two-family. Jericho is going to lose a renter to Stevens Linen, for example, and anybody can live where they want. I'm not saying they can't, but a program like this will help the person who's over in that area, maybe allay some of their fears, get their property up to code work, as Andrew said, and they can worry about taking care of what they have instead of worrying about what may or may not happen. So I appreciate the extension of the deadline. I appreciate the extension. Hopefully we fill the senior center again with people that want to do this.
okay. Thank you, David. Anybody in the audience have any, would like to speak on this topic, as it is a public hearing? Okay.
Motion to close.
Well, I have one more.
I'm sorry.
Whenever we talk about grants, I always ask, about the strings that it may be attached. Can anybody just address that for people who get a little nervous when we take?
Sure. So this one actually has fewer strings than you would think, and there are no matching funds required. There's a whole lot of bureaucratic requirements, a lot of reporting, but the Planning Commission, and I believe you have in your packet for the meeting, there was an MOU, a draft MOU between the town and the Planning Commission. So if you're funded, we'll take care of all the administrative parts for you. But as a community, it's relatively one of the easier grant programs out there to have in terms of no financial commitment on your end.
Thanks for that.
Excellent. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, if there's no other questions, I will close the public hearing at 7:48. 6:48, excuse me. Yeah. Board members, what's your pleasure?
Take my glasses off to read this one.
There's a motion on there.
Want me to try?
Okay, Jay.
Jay?
Sure. Make a motion to support and approve the submission of a FY21 CDBG application, including the activity as presented today, with allowance for minor budget or program adjustments, and to authorize the chair and town administrator, financial staff, to sign all documents required for the application.
Motion by Mr. Johnson?
Second.
Second by Mr. Sigenovich. Any other discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Gary Sigenovich, aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Paul?
Paul Joseph, aye.
John Marcy, aye. Unanimous.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
Appreciate it
sir.
very much. Okay. All right. Well, moving on, number 6, we have some new business. Is Paul Commissioner here? Oh, Chief is here on behalf of Paul to talk about the MDA boot drive toll booth that they do every year. They would like to have it Saturday, September 25th, 2021, 8 a.m. to noon on the town line with Webster. Chief.
Yeah, this is just the same Muscular Dystrophy Association boot drive that the fire union does every year. Obviously, it wasn't done last year due to COVID, so they're looking to do it at the end of September, at the usual time that they've done it every year.
Do you have a rain date, Chief?
We do not. Usually, it would be the following. It would be the following Saturday. But I don't know if Paul checked. I know Paul checked with you at this date, so it was all open.
Was the following Saturday?
Klingons.
Hang
My
on,
son
that's
sent me a
exactly what I was
text.
gonna say. Okay.
Mr. Chair, make a motion that we grant the request. Dudley Firefighters Association? Second.
No, it's local
full-time.
427, local 4271.
Okay. For
The association helps out too. It's really both.
For the MDA boot drive, on behalf of the firefighters union, toll booth Saturday, September 25th, 2021, 8 to noon at the town line, bottom of West Main.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Sullivan, seconded by Mr. Sullivan. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, do we want to just
Mr.
grab
Ritter?
the following Saturday as a potential rain
Yeah,
date?
I would,
You got it, Michelle.
I would say it so we don't have to go back.
Rain date of
Who seconded?
the following week,
What did I say?
October
Mr. Sullivan.
3rd.
October 3rd, rain date.
October 3rd?
Chair needs an edit on that one. Sorry about that. All right, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Sullivan amended his motion. Is that acceptable to Mr. Johnson, the seconder?
Yes.
Okay. All, roll call vote?
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Paul?
Paul Joseph, aye.
Gary Sigenovich, aye.
John Marcy, aye. Unanimous.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Chief.
Chief.
All right, item 7, old business. Don Jacobs is here. Salary compensation study. The Board of Selectmen is going to read his final report. Don's done a lot of work on this, and we'll take a vote, following motion, or take any action there too. Jonathan, would you like to set the table for Mr. Jacobs, please?
Mr. Chairman, as you recall, the Board of Selectmen voted to approve and adopt the grade study for the reclassification study for the current employees, and we've been using that ever since then. Tonight, Mr. Jacobs will talk a little bit about the compensation plan, which includes market rate compensation for our current employees and future hires. And I have a couple of sample motions that included on the agenda that I'd like the board to consider, which would bring us into the range of being marketable to retain current employees and to recruit future employees, which I think is something that's been a real struggle for the town the last several years.
Agreed. Don, welcome.
Good evening. I also
You
have Lorna is with me, who's the chairperson of the
Chairman,
Hey,
Personnel
Lorna.
Board.
Yeah, Mr. Joseph. Hold on, Don and Lorna, hang on.
could I ask that whatever motion or motions we pass also include a net increase cost to the town?
The net increase cost will be 0 for the first year. It will not come out of this budget. It'll be federal funds used to achieve the first year's market rate adjustment.
Okay, Paul, did you get that from
Are
Jonathan?
there any projections, Mr. Chairman? Yep. Are there any projections beyond the first year?
No, because people come in, might have new employees at different levels. We don't know, right?
The first year projection would be about $60,000 to bring everyone in town hall at market rate. The second year would potentially be within that category, I would imagine, above and beyond what this fiscal year is budgeted as.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Agree with it.
Mr. Chairman,
Hey, go ahead, Paul.
does the town administrator have a proposal as to where those funds will come from?
Why don't we hear from Mr. Jacobs and Lorna about what they found, and then we can get into that, Paul? Is that okay?
That's what I was gonna say.
That's fine.
Thank you, Paul. Don and
Yeah,
Lorna?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lorna, do you want to say anything first, or?
I want to state that we have worked, and I have worked very closely with Don. Don has been very transparent about the proposal. I've worked in conjunction with Mr. Ruda. Mr. Ruda has been involved in the conversations. Don and I have had many conversations about the process and the philosophy that is behind this compensation package that he's proposing. And as the sole member right now of the Personnel Board,
Need to get your help. You need to get your help.
I am saying that as chair of that Personnel Board, I am in support of this concept as a way to treat the people that work for the town of Dudley in an equitable, fair manner. And so, and I feel that it places responsibilities for evaluation and for hiring people and for the determination of where people are as far as wages are concerned with the person that it should be placed with. So as the member of that board, I am in support of this proposal.
Thank you, Lorna.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be here.
See you again, Don.
It's been a while.
Yes.
Before we get into the employee compensation plan that you have before you this evening, I just want to take you back and just spend a few minutes talking about what the board has previously approved relative to what we refer to as a classification and compensation plan. I may have said to you when I first met with you that from the get-go, one of the objectives we had was to develop a process to enable the town to pay a position and distinct and separate from paying an employee. Obviously, the two are related to one another, but the goal of the classification and compensation plan, which the board has previously approved, was to establish a process in accordance with what is referred to as the Massachusetts Pay Equity Law, which basically says that in order to pay positions and employees, the word fair in this context means in a consistent way. Consistent, frankly, means you can explain it. But also in doing so to pay them, as Lorna mentioned, in an equitable way. The word equitable in this context means competitive. And in doing so, we have developed a process to pay positions based on what the pay equity law refers to as comparable worth. What that means in practical terms is that a position is to be paid more money or less money based on the required minimum skill, effort, and/or responsibility under similar working conditions that is required. That's the basic premise or the basic point behind the Massachusetts pay equity law. And so let me restate that again so the board's comfortable on it and understands it. The process is intended to pay positions and employees, no matter which one we're talking about, in a consistent way, but at the same time do it equitably, which means competitive, both internally within the town as well as externally in comparison to the marketplace. And that is done basically by establishing a process to measure what the law refers to as comparable worth. And again, comparable worth simply means what's the required skill, effort, and/or responsibility that's required of a position in comparison to or of an employee in one position in comparison to an employee in another position. And based on that, we developed a classification or a grade plan, and each grade level has a respective salary range structure that the board has previously reviewed and approved the process to establish and also maintain that classification compensation plan. So in that context, the phrase classification and compensation refers to how positions are paid to one another, and then how the ranges, the minimum maximum of each range, has been established using market data, using the rate of pay of an employee, and also their years of service to define the word competitive relative to the salary range structure. What we're talking about tonight is a process to pay employees within positions. And the employee process that we're recommending to you is based on several criteria. And I believe you have a packet from me, and I'm looking at page 4 in the handouts that you have in front of you. And as it says, there are basically 4 criteria that we're recommending be used in order to pay employees. And when we talk about paying employees, we're talking about both hiring new employees as well as paying current employees to retain them. So it's both. So the components that make up the employee compensation plan, and if you look at page 4, if you look at the top of the page, it says components of employee compensation plan. So the first criteria is competitiveness. So an employee should be paid based on how that rate of pay compares both internally within the town of Dudley, but also externally in comparison to the marketplace. And in order to interpret the marketplace, the process that we've developed that's part of the classification compensation plan is to use the salary survey data, specifically the midpoint of the survey data that's collected for each grade level, and take the average of that midpoint data, and that creates what we refer to as a benchmark. A benchmark is nothing more, again, than the average of the survey data or the mean of the survey data for each grade level. And that becomes a guide by which the town is able to establish a minimum and a maximum for each salary range to that benchmark. And you don't have that plan in front of you. That was what you previously had approved, okay? So competitiveness is one of the criteria that the town administrator mentioned will be used to pay employees, both, again, to hire them as well as to retain them. The second criteria will be years of service in the current position. And we're recommending that years of service be used depending upon what rate of pay the employee starts at. If they're hired below what we refer to as a competitive rate of pay, then within a defined period of time, subject to what the town can afford, the employee's rate of pay would be brought up to a competitive rate of pay, depending upon where they start within that salary range. The third criteria is performance, and what we've recommended is that performance be used as a criteria specifically with regard to your exempt employees or exempt positions. Exempt means employees that are not eligible for overtime. And what I've recommended is that the process by which the town recognizes, I'd like to use the word accomplishment rather than performance, but as employees are able to accomplish what it is they seek to complete, then there would be a process established linked to those accomplishments that would recognize and reward an employee with additional compensation based on what they accomplish. And the fourth criteria would be what I call a market rate of adjustment. And I'm using the term market rate of adjustment, not cost of living. In the past, when the town has approved a salary adjustment for employees, you've typically referenced it as a cost of living adjustment. That's not what it's ever been intended to be. If the town at some point wants to use cost of living as a indicator or a criteria to pay someone more money, then you can do that. But what I'm recommending is that employees would be eligible, the fourth criteria would be what I refer to as a market rate of adjustment. So again, just to repeat myself, there are basically four criteria that employees would receive additional compensation. First one would be competitiveness. The second one would be the years of service in a position. And years of service would only be utilized to bring employees, if they're not already paid competitively, up to a competitive rate of pay. If they're at a rate of pay, then years of service would not apply to them. The third criteria would be performance, and specifically or initially for exempt employees, your managers. Once that process is established, then I think you'll be in a position to roll out a process to pay non-exempt employees based on performance, but not until then. And we can go back in more detail if you'd like in a minute. And the fourth criteria, as I've already mentioned, is employees would be eligible for a market rate adjustment. The issue that the other selectmen just raised relative to cost, in other words, based on whatever the town can afford to spend, like any other budget item for, in this case, salary adjustments, all I've done is outline for you a process to spend that money. In other words, what drives the process to pay employees is still and always will be what the town can afford. Plain and simple. Then the obvious question is, what's the most effective way to spend that money? And as I said, I've outlined basically four criteria to enable the town to treat employees consistently in order to, and also at the same time to pay them competitively. I just want to highlight a couple of things, and I know your packet's fairly detailed. What's included in your packet is a performance evaluation form that I'm recommending the town adopt, as well as what I refer to as a set of guidelines, which are really nothing more to help employees complete the performance evaluation form. And as you'll notice, this form that's in your packet is intended to replace the current form that the town has been using relative to evaluating employees' performance. So this is a new form. And you'll notice that the new form contains basically four components. The four components are the job duties, the objectives, skills that are required for an employee, and then last but not least, what we call a development plan, or what the employee needs to improve upon as part of their performance system. So the performance system that we're recommending to you tonight contains those four components. Your previous evaluation form basically only contained two. Your previous form, if you look at it, mentioned the skills that are required. The problem that I had with the form in that regard was that the same skills were applied to all employees. What we're recommending here is that the skill criteria, that third criteria, would be customized to the skills that an employee actually is required to have. So it's customized to meet the skill requirements for each individual employee, not necessarily the same skills. And that makes up the performance plan. And that essentially is the employee compensation plan. It's meant to be intentionally simple. In other words, basic guidelines that would apply to all employees so that we meet the standard or the criteria of doing this consistently, and at the same time we meet the objective of paying employees competitively, and once again within the town's appropriation, based on what the town can afford. There are some specific recommendations relative to policy that I want to just quickly highlight with you, if I could find them in a second. So what I'm recommending is that the town establish a policy that recognizes that it's the responsibility of the town administrator to administer the classification compensation plan. What I mean by that is it becomes the responsibility of the town administrator to determine who receives additional compensation, when they receive it, and last but not least, how much they receive, all consistent within the appropriation that the town approves. That new employees would be hired within what we refer to as a hiring pay band which is basically the first quadrant within each salary range. But the policy would also state that it is the policy of the town with regard to hiring new employees to hire them within the pay band, the first pay band within each salary range, with the understanding that the town reserves the right to hire a new employee above the hiring pay band based on the qualifications of an applicant and/or changes in the market conditions. So the town always has the flexibility to determine what that starting rate of pay should be for a new employee. But all things considered equal, it is the policy of the town, or what's being recommended, to hire new employees within that first quadrant, very simply giving them room to grow within the salary range. Not a particular number, not the minimum or any other specific number, but within that hiring pay band, or what we refer to as a hiring range, which is consistent with basically the first quadrant within each grade level. And that employees would then be eligible for an annual salary adjustment that would be based on a dollar adjustment, not a percentage adjustment. And the reason why I'm saying that, in my opinion, it is more equitable, it is fair to pay employees a dollar adjustment as opposed to a percentage. So very simply, the lower the rate of pay, the greater the percentage. Now, the town up until this point has been paying people typically, when I say people, I'm talking about employees, the same percentage across the board. What I'm recommending is the town not continue to do that in the future, for the simple reason that I don't feel it's equitable. What town employees should receive is a dollar adjustment, not a percentage adjustment. One, it's easy to calculate, it's clearer relative to what you're going to give someone as an adjustment, and rather than you and I both getting, or two employees getting the same percentage, the employees would receive a dollar adjustment, which means they wouldn't necessarily get the same percentage. So the percentage adjustment is weighted, the lower the rate of pay, the greater the percentage, all within the dollar appropriation. Employees that are hired within the first quadrant of each salary range, and I mentioned earlier that years of service would apply, what I've recommended as a policy, that within 3 years, employees would be brought up to a market rate of pay if their starting salary is below that minimum of the market equity range. Okay? 3 years, there's nothing magical about it, it's a reasonable number, but even that's not etched in stone, it's always subject to what the town can afford. The point I'm trying to make is that when you hire a new employee, what I'm recommending is the town then communicate to the employee that it is the policy of the town to pay employees competitively and to do so within appropriation, but if we're not going to start you at a competitive rate of pay, then it is our policy to bring you up to a competitive rate within a reasonable period of time. And I'm suggesting 3 years is a good guideline to follow in that regard. So other than an adjustment to bring them, what I call an equity adjustment that the town administrator mentioned earlier, to bring someone up to a competitive rate of pay, they would be eligible for what I'm referring to, as I said before, as a market rate of adjustment, not a cost of living adjustment. Okay? So that would be basically the minimum salary adjustment that employees would be entitled to from 1 year to the next. Anything over and above that market rate adjustment would be determined based on performance. And the only way years of service would apply would be if someone's current rate of pay is below the market rate. And these terms, market rate of pay, is defined in the salary plan that you have in your packet. So you can see the specific dollar amount, which basically enables the town to cost out, based on what you can afford, how you're going to spend the money so that you're always assured that you're staying within the appropriation. So once that appropriation is determined by the board with the finance committee as part of your normal budget process, then the question becomes, well, how is the town going to spend that appropriation, specifically for salary adjustments that are specific to an employee, that enables an employee, if they're not at a competitive rate of pay, to be brought up to a rate of pay within a reasonable period of time. If they are already at a competitive rate of pay, then they would be minimally entitled to a market rate of adjustment. And in addition to that, once you've established a performance rating system, they would be eligible for additional compensation based on their performance. So when it's all said and done and the plan is up and running, and the adjustment that the town administrator referenced in his opening comments were really intended to bring the employees that we've identified whose current rate of pay is not competitive up to that minimum market rate of pay, which is why we can say to you with all assurity that the town can stay within your appropriation. So you're always spending money within your appropriation. The only question that remains really is more of an administrative question, consistent with the policies that the board establishes for the town administrator to manage the compensation plan, which, as I mentioned earlier, really means basically to determine who receives what amount of money, when they receive it, and of course, how much. So if you really stop and think about what I'm suggesting or recommending to you tonight, it's a process that's a very open process. I might have mentioned also when we first met, the number one problem, by far, that not only the town of Dudley, but every municipality frankly faces with regard to how to manage compensation is lack of communication. This process is really designed, if you really stop and look at it, to open up communication between the employee and the town, and to establish a process, which is why that word consistent is so important, that the employees understand, and obviously so does the town. So that the town is able to maintain the process of paying employees in positions both competitively and also consistently, and do so within appropriations. Okay? So really, I think the exciting thing from my perspective, it introduces to you now the concept of performance and paying employees based on what they accomplish. The reason why I'm recommending that you start with your exempt employees is because they're the ones who have to plan what to do and how to do things. I've had several meetings with your department heads, and we've talked about this process and the 4 components that the performance system makes up. But there's additional training that frankly needs to take place so that your employees, particularly your department heads, are comfortable. They feel basically that it's a win for them as well as a win for the town, and everyone understands how the performance system is going to work. So it's a very simple, basic program, but it's also very comprehensive because it takes into consideration not only what people do all the time, which are their job duties, but it also takes into consideration their objectives, which are things that they plan to accomplish over and above in addition to their job duties. So both aspects of an employee's job, their ongoing job duties and their objectives, are both part of this process. And then last but not least, the skill that they need to have on an individual employee by employee basis is also the third criteria. Okay?
Sound familiar? Okay.
So I'm sorry if I've run on a little bit too much, but
Okay.
it is fairly comprehensive. But at the same time, hopefully it's simple enough that everyone should be able to understand it.
Awesome,
This
thank you.
comes with directions, Mr. Johnson.
Sorry?
This one comes along with directions.
Yeah, no, I saw that. All right, thank you, Don. That was very, very helpful. I love the packet, the way it's put together. Board member comments first. John, Jay, go ahead.
So, thank you. This is a common sense approach used in many, many places where, you know, there's goals that need to be met. You measure what you can measure. You design the goals to be something that can be reached. It makes sense. And it's about the conversation between the employee and the employer.
Correct.
And how to go from point A to point B, both for them and for the town.
Right.
So it makes perfect sense. And the little joke from earlier is trying to explain this with all these nice handouts. So, you know, thank you. This makes perfect sense to me.
David.
Make a motion that Mr. Johnson represents it. No, I'm just kidding. So just for the people at home, just to crunch the numbers real quick, the draft classification and compensation plan we have, that lists 35 jobs. 14 of them at least exceed the first number in the red column, which I guess we would define that as probably the starting rate of the market equity range benchmark.
That's correct.
So 14 of them. I didn't do all of them, but there's a couple others that are close, like 1714 is the number. It's a couple 1694s. So yes, I think we need to do some work and adopt a common sense plan. But to be fair, like there's another one, 2355, the range is 2404. We're pretty close on at least a third. You know, some of them, and I also question just some of the data on the side, like for example,
Years of service.
years of service column. It seems like there's several errors that jumped out at me, and I'm not picking on people, but the first one is admin assistant for the police. It says 16 years of service. I don't believe the admin has 16. And obviously, this was done in the beginning when our previous superintendent, 33, treasurer collector 7, fire chief 6. I just think some of those numbers are skewed, which would obviously change the mentality you were saying. You go to seniority in the position would establish a higher rate of pay.
That's understandable.
Right. But I'm just saying, if you look at this chart, there's some anomalies that just need to be corrected.
Yeah, again, if I could, Mr. Chairman, just to help you understand that last column, as I mentioned before, there are 3 criteria that we've used to define competitive. So I apologize if there are some inaccuracies relative to an individual's, particularly years of service. But those are there as a guide, basically. And really what we're saying, as I mentioned before, is that within a reasonable period of time from when an employee is hired, reasonable by my definition means 3 years. What we're suggesting is that within that time frame, if the current rate of pay is not competitive, which means below the market rate, minimum market equity range, then they would be brought up to that minimum market equity range within a reasonable period of time, which I'm suggesting under normal circumstances would be roughly 3 years. But now you can see what the actual numbers are. So there's a lot of good news, as I think the member of the board is pointing out. And really, now that we've defined the word competitive, and you see the word benchmark right in the middle of that chart, that's really the target. That's the average survey average midpoint. That gives you a good understanding of what the market is doing, literally on a position-by-position basis. And so that becomes the target. It's not a particular number, but it's a range between the minimum and the maximum of the market equity range that we're trying to get employees up into so that the town meets its commitment to pay people competitively.
Okay, thanks. Kerry, anything?
I like this, and for reasons different than, same but different from Mr. Johnson. I look at where, and I'm not going to disclose anyone's salary, but I see some differences. And I see where you want to bring everyone, you use the word equitable, that's a great word, bring everyone up to an equitable first step, but then going forward, someone gets rewarded for more than just showing up. If someone's meeting their goals, their SMART goals, they're compensated for that, and that's the type of employee, in my opinion, you want to keep and hold on to. I think this is great, and I notice a lot of the verbiage in here I've seen in employee handbooks, and I can't help but think that us not having a traditional human resources department, that this would help us from a legal standpoint, as far as being fair and equitable to the employees.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
And I think that's what we want to be.
Yeah, I appreciate hearing that. And in that regard, what I would encourage the board, once you now have these plans established, is then to approve, meaning the Board of Selectmen should approve a set of administrative policies, which really basically give direction to the town administrator as to how you want the town administrator to manage this process. So even though I'm suggesting it's not the Board of Selectmen that decides who, what, and when an employee receives an adjustment, but that decision is made consistent with the Board of Selectmen's policies. So you're always overseeing, you're always managing, from a policy standpoint, how the compensation plan is implemented, okay? So in the reports that I've given the town as part of the final report, there is a set of administrative policies that I've recommended to the town administrator that be brought before the Board of Selectmen and incorporated basically into your other human resource or personnel policies that you have, because I know you have a personnel manual.
Jay?
Mr. Chairman, how does this work with several departments being run by, let's say, an elected official or a contract employee? How does the overarching system work?
Yeah, that's a great question. What I've recommended, you'll notice in your packet, there's also a performance management cycle that's recommended to be tied directly to your budget process. What I'm suggesting to you tonight is that your budget format needs to change. And I've given the town administrator some examples of other towns where basically the first page of every department's budget will be the goals and objectives of that department and the measurement standards that are established to measure how the department accomplishes its objectives. So it's one thing to say you want to do something, but as I think as one of the selectmen mentioned just a minute ago, you want to make sure you also include the measurement standards, so there are no surprises. Either you've accomplished what you set out to do, or you didn't. The only question, obviously, is, well, if you didn't, why not? Doesn't mean necessarily something bad has happened, but the fact of the matter is that by putting those measurement standards into your budget book, so the budget process becomes synonymous with the performance process. The reason why I always recommend doing it that way is that, well, the message we want to send to department heads is that we're not asking you to do something in addition to what you're already doing. When you prepare a budget, what we're now asking you to do is prepare your goals and objectives at the same time. So it's not an additional task. It doesn't mean you shouldn't say you don't have the time to do it. If you have time to put a budget together, which you obviously have to do as a department head, you have time to put your goals and objectives together, which really are the basis upon which you're asking for an appropriation to begin with. So the process is linked to your budget. Whether the department head is elected or not really doesn't make any difference, frankly. How you get into the position isn't the issue. The issue is, once you're in the position, then you have the responsibility, consistent with the policies established by the Board of Selectmen, to establish goals and objectives for your department, which has absolutely nothing to do with whether you're elected or appointed. It has everything to do with how you're managing your department, and as I think one of the selectmen mentioned before, consistent with the goals of the town, meaning the Board of Selectmen. So that becomes a very, very important part of the communication process relative to what a particular department does or doesn't do, because you'll notice, by the way, when you look at the performance evaluation form, what's also recommended to be established, not just the objectives, but a set of priorities, criteria, to determine what's the most important objective from the least important. Oftentimes, when I look at performance systems, they leave out the priorities. You and I both know everyone has too much to do, not enough money to do it, or not enough resources. The obvious question that really needs to be part of your performance process is, how do I determine what's most important from least important, consistent with what the Board of Selectmen wants me to do? And as I've said to your department heads, if there's any doubt in your mind, any doubt that your Board of Selectmen doesn't know what you're doing, or you don't know what your Board of Selectmen wants you to do, you need to stop what you're doing. There's a breakdown in communication potentially. So the goal objectives process is really designed, as I mentioned, I think earlier, no surprises. It becomes a bottom-up driven process from the employee through the town administrator to the Board of Selectmen. So elected really, once again, has nothing to do with what the department's responsibilities or objectives are. It only pertains to how you actually become the treasurer collector or whatever position you're talking about.
For me, we do this, all the time, and having actually tools and, to actually follow a process like this is great. The only thing I would add, you're talking about, I love the fact that reviews should never be a surprise. And I would even add a step that we should have one-on-ones. I think they do informally, but, I schedule one-on-ones with my team weekly, so I know. And it's, that way it's like, you can actually, it's easier than just waiting for one big event.
Yeah, that's a
My
good
review
point.
today,
Well,
like you said.
one of the real hang-ups, one of the problems associated with performance management
Right.
is that it takes a lot of time.
Never registered voter in town.
And so in talking to the town administrator about it, that's why this process is designed to be bottom-up driven.
Right.
If you look at the performance cycle that I've outlined for you in the packet,
Yep.
essentially what it outlines are 4 steps. The first step obviously being preparing your goals and objectives. Your second step being making any adjustments to those goals and objectives at least once during the year or as often as necessary. And the third step being a review of what's transpired during the past year. So that it becomes the responsibility of the employee to communicate to, in this case, the town administrator, when he or she feels they cannot get something accomplished that's previously been agreed to. And so by doing it that way, it puts hopefully a minimum amount of pressure or time constraint on the town administrator so that he can devote as much time to his own goals and objectives,
Right.
just as each department head devotes the time to their own goals and objectives.
Okay. Thanks for that. You had Paul. Anything?
Mr. Chairman,
Paul?
He's got the TV.
Yeah,
That's why.
I want to thank both of our speakers for what I consider a knowledgeable and thoughtful proposal that is comprehensive yet simple, and especially the concept of comparable work. All of that, I think, will serve the town well in the future, hiring and retaining qualified long-term employees.
Agreed. Okay. Thank you, guys. And Joan, hi, Joan's here too. Hi. Okay, so we have board members. There's a bunch of motions. Jonathan, did you mean for us to read all of those, or just one of those, or some of those?
The first motion, Mr. Chairman, addresses non-contracted, non-elected positions that are classified in grade levels 1, 2, and 3, based on the classification plan that the board accepted, and fall between the minimum market equity range. The first motion would move those employees up to the first step in the market equity range, which is not the benchmark, but the first step. I think Mr. Siganovich kind of went through the numbers on that briefly. Or, I'm sorry, Mr. Sullivan did.
Yeah.
The second motion would address, and I'm calling this a one-time equity adjustment that would bring, and that would bring those employees up to the market equity range. Those that currently fall within that range, I think Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Siganovich brought up, will receive the final cost of living adjustment, because we can't use that term anymore. For those eligible non-contracted, non-elected positions that currently fall within the market equity range specified in the employee compensation plan, which we reviewed tonight. And specifically in the first motion, grade level 4, grade level 4 would also receive a one-time market equity adjustment, but it would apply only to full-time employees. So I think that's a first prudent, rational, practical step to take within what we can afford to do this year that addresses everyone.
Okay. Steve?
All right, I understand, I think I understand what Mr. Ruda just said. So basically 4, 5, and 6.
Are left alone, because they're mostly contracted or elected officials. So that we wouldn't, it's certainly not gonna open renegotiate contracts or assign anything that would tie our hands in future negotiations. And elected officials necessarily have to be done at town meeting, so, in the form of an article, so I would propose that we don't even address that. We address 1 through 4, 4 only for full-time employees.
See, that's where, Mr. Chair,
Steve?
this is where the process is kind of broken down too. We don't have, I haven't seen a performance evaluation on anybody in years.
Other than
So,
Jonathan?
Right,
no,
but
just
we
to
have to do him. No, but I'm saying, because I, now, see, if you start naming positions, looks like you're playing favorites. I would like to see,
This is a one-time equity adjustment. Going forward, everything would be based on, we would now begin the process that
Merit.
Ron outlined, everything would be merit-based. This brings everybody up to market range, one-time equity adjustment. Going
Except-
forward, everything is based on a performance evaluation.
so essentially, Mr. Chair, if I dumb
Go
it
ahead.
down so I can understand it,
Go ahead.
everybody that's not in the low red will be in the low red,
Correct.
Yes,
except for only 2 positions.
elected, yes.
No, well, I was not talking
Oh, the
elected, 2
full-time part.
non-full-time.
Right.
Elected and contracted wouldn't be.
Right, I'm not talking about elected,
The full,
contract.
part-time, full-time.
correct. Part-time, The VSO, I'll say it, the VSO and the building commissioner are the only two that won't be affected. Everybody else that's not elected.
Or non-contracted, right?
Correct. So, before I take a vote, and I'm not saying either one deserves more or less or higher, how do we go about telling those two people, sorry, you're gonna get a COLA, which to me is a
The
form.
good news, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, wait, I'm not
is
done
that-
yet,
Go ahead, I'll do
because
it.
COLA to me, I've said it many times, I'll say it again, is a misused term here, because we can call it a COLA, but what it comes out to is, as Don said, a percentage raise.
Is their annual raise.
Because we don't base, COLA is a fixed formula to come to a COLA. And two previous administrators is the one who started calling it a COLA. If you give me a 2% raise based on nothing except you give me 2%, you can't call it a COLA. A COLA is a formula-based raise, and sometimes you get more, and sometimes you get less. So to call it a COLA has always been a complete misnomer. But to go back to my original point, and I'm not saying one or two of those people or both deserve more. So we're essentially telling everyone not elected, not contracted, if you're on this list and you're not in that range, everyone is going to be brought up to that range except for VSO and building commissioner. How do we go back to those two people and tell them, because you're not full-time, everybody, unless, if Don can clarify, is that a full-time number in the red? If, for example, it's a 19-hour-a-week employee, but the red for his position is 34.19, is that if the person was full-time?
No, not, I think the word I always like to use is that they are a regular employee. Regular meaning they're scheduled to work 52 hours a year. Whether they work full-time or part-time,
52 weeks a year.
that's a budget issue. But the point is that they're regularly scheduled to work 52 weeks per year.
So
So it doesn't necessarily mean full-time.
I'll just take, Mr. Chair, if I may
Go ahead,
continue one more
Steve.
time.
Go ahead, let's talk it out.
I'll just take the last two people in the grade level 4 category. Building commissioner is 19 hours for us?
19 or more.
He's 20. He's benefit eligible, Mr.
Benefit,
Chairman.
okay, so he's 20, right? 20 hours, thank you, Rich. But the one right below him, highway superintendent, sorry, Jeff, we know he's full-time, and he's probably full-time plus because he's a salaried employee. So a 20-hour-a-week employee in Don's study should be treated the same as a 40-hour-a-week employee? That's what you're saying?
Obviously, how much the employee earns, because they work more hours per week, that's a different issue.
Right, but the
That's a
hourly
budget
rate.
ation.
Right, the hourly rate. That's what I'm saying. Just-
At an hourly rate of paying. So I work 40 hours a week times an hourly rate, someone else works 20 hours a week. Obviously, the 40-hour-a-week person's gonna earn more money. But they both meet the minimum requirement of what I call it being a regular employee, which means scheduled to work 52 weeks a year.
Okay, so circling back to my original statement, everybody on this list that's not there will be there except for those two people. So it won't be us. I mean, I'll get phone calls, I'm
I
sure,
can
but
answer
it'll
the
fall on
question.
Mr. Ruda.
Good, Jonathan, answer. And
This
then-
is not Don-related, this is entirely me-related, with excluding contract and the 5s and the 6, including me. We're not even gonna consider as part of this study at this point in time, because there's only a specific amount of money that I want put at it. And the most vital employees we have, the most underpaid employees, are grades 1 through 4, full-time. Those are the ones that we wanna keep marketable, those are the ones that we wanna be able to recruit
Equitable.
different, better talent for, and as the positions have been turning over left and right.
I understand that.
So I have no problem telling the VSO that we'll do a one-time merit increase. We'll have a merit-based increase, or the same with Nelson. We'll have a discussion about doing a performance evaluation, doing an increase that way. Because I had to figure out where to put the money, and in my estimation, those are the best places to put it.
So,
Using federal funds.
so accepting that, and before we make a motion, because there's a whole line of motions we have to make, I'm gonna ask the board's consideration. And the administrator can refute it, agree with it, tell me to go pound sand. That at a minimum, we consider bringing the VSO the building commissioner up to the yellow column, which would be the entry-level hiring wage. It won't be the market wage, but they won't be excluded from another year before we give them a performance review with manageable goals and objectives and reasonable, attainable, as Paul likes to say. So at some point, I'd like to include a motion, or in the motion, you could, at the end,
Yep.
bring those two up to what Don has listed in his yellow column as the minimum, which would be the floor of a hiring range. Maybe we can do that at the end, after we adopt this study, this pay scale, because right now we don't have that, hasn't been adopted yet. New
The
hiring range.
compensation plan has not been, right.
Right,
It
that has not been
been.
adopted yet, so if this plan gets adopted, I would like to ask the board to consider coming back for another motion, which isn't pre-written, to bring those two positions up to the minimum, to the floor of the new hiring range, which would give those gentlemen both an increase, not to the equity range, and then we'd have the department head, who's Jonathan, sit them down and say, okay, to get to here, we'll do the fourth-step review at the end. If people just want to get that out there now,
okay.
instead of, so
Fair.
people can think about it while we read
It's
these
fair.
motions.
Kerry?
I want to piggyback on something Mr. Sullivan said. We've been using this term COLA for how many years, and it's not a COLA. Let's just get rid of COLA, get rid of the term, never speak of it again. I also noticed what he said about the VSO and the building commissioner, and building inspector, commissioner, sorry there. I think there should be some kind of a equity adjustment, and like I said, I think we need to lose the term COLA. Because especially this year with the way inflation is looking, that could be a dangerous term. So let's lose COLA.
Okay. Rich, did you have something? You were waving earlier.
I want to thank the treasurer too, Mr. Chair, for correcting me. I didn't realize he was benefit eligible.
Yeah.
That was my only point. He's considered benefit eligible, so if you'd like to extend it, health insurance eligible, and he's participating in the retirement system, so for your consideration there. Obviously, it's the board's pleasure to go through and include or exclude, but his deductions go to Worcester Regional. So he's a
VSO
full-time-
two, Rich?
I'm sorry?
VSO two?
For 2022, he is considered benefit eligible based on last year's hours worked.
However, to qualify that, he's based on last year because he put in extended care act funded hours for the to bring more services to veterans in their homes for kids, so it was an outlier year.
Okay. I wasn't sure about that one either, but thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Rich.
Thank you.
Paul?
No questions.
Okay. Okay, now, board members,
I appreciate it.
That's the right thing
there's a
to do.
bunch of motions here for
Do
us.
the right thing.
Some people didn't raise, they don't deserve. Sorry. I'll choose not to make the motion. Anybody else got it?
Jason?
To make a motion to approve the proposed employee compensation plan, and further move to authorize the town administrator to implement a one-time equity adjustment based on the accepted employee compensation plan for all non-contracted, non-elected positions that are classified in grades 1, 2, and 3, and fall below the minimum market equity range up to the first step minimum amount within the market equity range and appropriate to the grade level for the position. Implement a one-time equity adjustment for full-time employees that are classified in grade level 4 and fall below the accepted market equity range up to the first step minimum amount within the market equity range appropriate to grade level 4.
Just does what you wanted right there.
Motion by Mr. Johnson,
Second.
second, Mr. Signarich, discussion. So, guys, this motion actually talks about what Steven said and puts them here, in the red, lower red, not yellow. just so everybody knows.
That's what this
No.
motion does. This takes,
1, 2, 3, and 4, right? Right?
No,
Right.
four, it's,
Four separate.
Oh, for
1, 2,
full-time,
and 3.
sorry, I missed that.
No, it's 1, 2, and 3. Doesn't.
Yeah, it was full-time, I missed
Only
that. I missed that.
full-time.
You're right. Okay,
could we adjust the motion?
well, we can do it at the end, let's see, hold on.
Yeah, I think we do this, then we come back and, if the board chooses to adjust the other two.
You wanna do it inside?
I'm just thinking, if we just,
I'd just rather make a motion, and if we agree to it, we agree to it.
Okay,
All right, so, but I'm with the change,
go ahead,
so, all right, let me make the change.
go ahead.
So,
No,
So
hold on, he's
the,
ready.
so the change we were just talking about, that I'm okay with, where it says equity adjustment for full-time employees are classified in grade level 4. How does that change?
does it?
It doesn't,
It doesn't, okay. Then I'll keep my motion as is.
okay.
will that
Missed the
include,
turn.
will that include?
No, we have to add that.
No, we'll do those after, I think.
Okay.
Do those
I'm
separate.
just trying to get it all done at once,
Yeah.
that's all.
Okay, yeah, I was thinking we do that
My
too.
second stands.
Okay, any other discussion? Roll call vote?
Jay Johnson, aye.
Carrie Sigenovich, aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Paul?
Paul Joseph, aye.
John Marcy, aye, unanimous. Okay, next.
I'll make this one, if you'd like.
Go ahead,
I'd
Kerry.
like to make a motion to authorize the town administrator to implement a minimal market equity adjustment that will replace a fiscal year 2022 cost of living adjustment for those remaining non-contracted, non-elected positions that currently fall within the market equity range specified in the employee compensation plan.
Motion by Mr. Sigenovich. Second by Mr. Johnson. Discussion?
Mr. Marcy, I
Steve?
think this
Kerry?
accomplishes what I had said about getting rid of the
Yes.
word COLA, not to be spoken again.
Yeah. Roll call vote?
Carrie Sigenovich, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Paul?
Paul Joseph, aye.
John Marcy, aye, unanimous. Next.
You sure it's only 60,000?
Jay?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to direct the town administrator, director of personnel, to develop and implement an employee evaluation plan that awards future increases based on accomplishments.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Johnson, seconded by Mr. Sigenovich. Discussion?
Mr. Marcy, these
Carrie.
are the SMART goals, correct?
They are.
Good stuff. That's all.
Okay, anything else on this one? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Carrie Sigenovich, aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Paul?
Paul Joseph, aye.
John Marcy, aye, unanimous. Next.
so,
Jonathan?
Mr. Chairman, before you make this motion, I want to explain it.
Okay,
Because the treasurer collector and the town clerk were involved in the study, I didn't want to be the one that made any sort of, I didn't want it to appear that I was overlooking either position. They're elected, their compensation is set at the town meeting.
oh, the fifth one. We're on the fourth one, but yeah, got it. Yeah, Jay.
Did I?
Yeah, we haven't done the.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The third
We
one.
can take it out of order, maybe?
Yeah.
So I wanted to just make sure that Rich fell within Don's plan in the market equity range. The town clerk didn't, so I wanted to make sure that after tonight, for the next week or so, it's not, I don't, that we recognize that one falls within, one doesn't, but we also recognize that it's up to the town meeting to set the compensation level.
Yep.
Are you talking about the last motion?
I'm talking about the
The
last
last
one.
motion. Jay?
Well, based on that conversation, I was wondering why elected officials were on here at all.
Right.
Right, but now that makes sense because it actually educates the people on what's going on in comparison to where we are, whether it's elected or not.
Right.
Right, so that's as equitable as you get, right? It's not up to us to
create a plan for that, but in all fairness, it's the information that needs to get out. So that
Correct.
proper decisions can be made by the townspeople for their elected officials.
Correct. So it's more of a, I guess it's a token motion, let's put it that way.
No, but I mean,
Informative motion.
informative, but if it
Correct.
actually came to a vote at a town meeting, we could always point to this and say, that's
Yeah.
appropriate based on the plan.
Now that we said that, can we explain the motion that's? Oh, it
Yeah,
has to be
number
made
4,
next.
the one before it, Jonathan. The compensation plan administration.
Town bylaw?
What about the town bylaw is important?
I'm already authorized as the Director of Personnel, to authorize the compensation plan and the review process, so this codifies it. With the new plan.
In that position currently.
Oh, those are the ones that I think he created.
Yeah, but some of us didn't, they left.
I'm excited about this one.
No, you can go.
If you hate it, you hate it, don't bother.
Do you have a Mr. Sullivan?
No, I
I just don't wanna have to do this every single year that we.
I understand.
I understand.
I'd like to make a motion
Budget.
to authorize the town
Keep reading.
administrator to administer the employee compensation plan as adopted on this date and authorized under town bylaw 6819D.
Motion by Mr. Johnson. Second. Second by Mr. Sigenovich. Discussion. Hearing none, roll call vote.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Gary Sigenovich, aye.
Sullivan, aye.
Paul?
Paul Joseph, aye.
John Marcy, aye, unanimous. Next,
Mr.
Kerry.
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to recognize the compensation of elected officials is set by town meeting. That's all I'm saying, that's it. And the reason for, well, after the second,
Second.
The reason for that is as was said earlier, but I took it a couple steps further in my brain. I don't want to kind of lead town meeting that one person's too much, one person's too little. It's set by town meeting. We're accountable to the voters, let the voters decide. Because in one way, they could reduce one, raise another, raise both, raise none. It's town meeting. That's it.
We have a motion by Mr. Sigenovich, seconded by Mr. Johnson. Okay, more discussion.
So I agree with Kerry here because, we don't have to make a motion to read the news. We just read the news, right? Watch the meetings, read the information, and that's what we need to do. Educate the people.
Educate the people on what? Which part?
The way the salaries fall. I
The
believe.
The way
equity part of?
the way the salaries fall in terms of the elected officials that we
Right.
mentioned before. Town clerk and treasurer collector were mentioned earlier.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Kerry Sigenovich, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Paul?
Paul Joseph, aye.
John Marcy, aye, unanimous.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yep.
I have a question for the administrator. Which of the following positions are currently vacant? Is clerk of highway planning conservation vacant?
Yes, for the
Someone
time
left.
being,
Right. Clerk for permit, licensing and code,
no,
that's full, we just filled that, right?
correct.
Okay. Clerk, building, health,
Kind of eliminated.
okay. So permit, licensing, code just got filled,
Yes,
and highway planning conservation is not at this time.
hopefully soon, but it will be.
Well, then,
No, it is not currently filled.
okay. So,
That was
Mr.
a layoff that I'm gonna repost.
Okay, so, Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion for the following two positions. VSO and building commissioner.
Mm-hmm.
That those two positions be brought up to in the yellow column, hiring range, first number of $29.50 each.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Sullivan, seconded by Mr. Sigenovich. Discussion. Hearing none, roll call vote.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Kerry Sigenovich, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Paul?
Paul Joseph, aye.
John Marcy, aye.
Mr. Chair,
Unanimous. John, Steve?
I would like to make a second motion. The following two positions. Clerk of Permit Licensing and Code Enforcement. And Administrative Secretary to the Town Administrator. Since both those positions fall below the minimum,
One of them is incorrect. One of them is, the permitting code enforcement is
above,
smack dab in the
okay.
in the market equity range.
Thank you. I didn't know the salary in that job. Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the Administrative Secretary for the Town Administrator hourly rate be set at the benchmark of $26.71, and the reason being, her current hourly is above the minimum benchmark. So out of everybody on this list, now that we corrected the other two, she will get nothing. Her rate is above the minimum, and if we bring her up to the
And
benchmark range.
so that,
Jonathan?
he's sitting right here.
Well, that's what happens, I'm sorry.
No, but you made a motion to allow me to make that market equity adjustment, and she was part of that plan.
So,
We're gonna do that with people who fall within that range.
so sorry, Michelle. So that position is the only one left that falls below
I think,
the entry, the first red number, which is was the floor of the market equity range. Her rate is above that. So
we did it for
where's the
Henry.
adjustment coming in?
We did that for Michelle and Dean, remember? We already did that.
He's a contract employee, he's different.
Right,
We set his rate to negotiation.
right.
I stand by my motion that we bring the administrative secretary for the town to the benchmark, which is the middle column, 2671
See that chart?
over 25.01 she makes now. And the reason being, she is above the minimum benchmark number, so out of the whole list now, she'd be the one getting nothing.
Motion by Mr. Sullivan. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Johnson. Discussion?
So she's the only one out of the whole list.
Of non-contract, non-elected.
Right. Is that accurate?
No, because the code enforcement clerk is is also in that red range.
But you just told me you were taking care of that.
And I was gonna take care of Michelle too, because they fell within that range, and do an adjustment, but not necessarily to the next step. But that's fine.
Well, now we did for one and not the other.
No, because the other one got hired at a set rate. The other one got hired at a rate already. Michelle's already an existing employee. I know it's hard talking about it, but it's $1.70.
Jay,
Mr. Chairman, isn't this the piecemeal stuff we wanted to avoid?
this is, well, we gave the town administrator,
Well, it won't be,
ability to do this.
Jay, if I can
Go
speak
ahead.
through the chair.
Go ahead.
It's piecemeal only in as much those 3 or 4 positions that I went through are the only outliers. And we took care of the 2. I was gonna make the second motion. Mr. Ruda has already taken care of 1 by hiring into that equity range. I'm not sure where, but I take him at his word that it's at least the floor. So then we're down to 1 person. 1 person and 1 vacant position, which he said is gonna be filled soon. And I would assume that person would also come in at the benchmark.
I would hire at the bench, between the first step and the benchmark would be where
Yes.
I would be hiring.
Okay. So
But, okay,
it's $1.70.
I see where, I see where.
well, then we'll have to do it, we have to do it equitably if we're gonna do that.
No,
But that's already in.
It's in the,
You already
we
did
already motioned to that.
we already motioned people into the range. Michelle, this administrative assistant secretary salary hourly is above the range, so she's not gonna get moved over. And I thought, simple move. I'll be honest, if we wanna go through every single position, we'll be here all night. We just gave raises of 5 figures to people. 5 figures. They're doing the job they're doing today and the job they're doing tomorrow is a 5-figure raise. And it's hard to talk because people are here. This is $1.70 an hour, puts our administrative assistant squarely in the market equity range, benchmark rate. After all these motions are done, if this one passes, every employee, except for elected, contracted, and the 2 part-timers, but we put them at the bottom of the hiring range, every employee will be, at a minimum, the floor of the benchmark range. And I guess I understand when Mr. John says it's kind of piecemeal, but if this motion passes, moving forward, with all the adoption of all these other motions, the piecemeal is over. We'll have a policy in place, we adopt the forms, we'll follow the path laid out. Going forward, we won't have this issue.
If I can, let me just explain what my intention was with that. The board motioned and passed authorization of the town administrator to implement a minimal market equity adjustment that will replace a cost of living adjustment for those remaining non-contracted, non-elected positions that currently fall within the market equity range specified in the employee compensation plan. So the town administrator's Board of Selectmen's administrative secretary was going to get a one-time market equity adjustment. It may not have been to the next full step of $1, but nobody was going to be overlooked in this plan.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask Mr.
Because
Town
I don't want to
Administrator,
open.
do you think we should be withdrawing that motion then?
I don't want to open Pandora's box and say, somebody who's worked here for 6, 7, 8 years and is currently $4 below the minimum market equity range is now going to have an argument and say, well, how come you're hiring somebody tomorrow within that market equity range? I've been here for 8 years. So we're opening that argument up. This was going to be a one-time adjustment to put everybody into market equity, and those that were there were going to get something above and beyond it. And that was it, one time, one and done.
We can ride it in circles, and I understand what the administrator's saying, so if.
You're just basically codifying for one person what he just said.
Correct, because every vote we've taken, including the previous one for those 2 part-timers, which I
Right.
appreciate the board's support,
Yep.
means everybody on that list. And I know the administrator said he was gonna do an equity adjustment, but so, argument's sake, if we're trying to do low, middle, high of the range, if the position's at 2501, it would go to 20, right now 2404 is a minimum. Go to the middle, go to the market benchmark as Mr. Jacobs presented, $1.70. So if, for example, it's public record, so I feel, is the administrator saying he's gonna give a 50-cent raise, 85-cent raise, $1?
It goes back to his thing with the years of service and the.
No,
Right.
Jonathan said he was gonna make a correction.
But I wasn't going to necessarily make a uniform correction for any employee that fell within that range.
No, we're only making one because everybody else, every other position just got bumped at a minimum to the low of the range. Michelle's the secretary's job actually went backwards. But we won't take money away, obviously. So, I can't explain anymore. So, Mr. Chair, I'll just ask, there's a motion and a second. I just asked for the vote, unless somebody has more comments. But
Chair's gonna move the question. Roll call vote.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Carrie Siganovich, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Paul?
Also,
John Marcy, aye. Unanimous.
Thank you. And now I think going forward, as Jay said, we're not gonna be piecemeal anymore. We have a plan now going forward. Appreciate all the work Don did with Mr. Ruda, department heads, individual employees, personnel board.
Great job, guys. Thank you very, very much. All right,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks.
good work, Don.
Mr. Chairman, we still have,
Warner. What's that?
Thanks, Lon.
we still have to get onto a town council on the horn for, in our executive session, too.
Yeah, I know. We're gonna move to 8. Board member comments? Jay, anything?
Nothing tonight.
Jerry?
And the, because of the, no.
Steve?
Just a couple quick ones, Mr. Chair. I had a chance to stay in touch with Fire and EMS, Police Chief, talked to Jeff last week leading up to the big storm. Appreciate Mr. Ruda was on vacation, but he was reachable, available. Appreciate all the work everybody did. I know we didn't get the brunt of the storm, but it was bad enough.
Oh, yeah.
And thank the department heads, their employees for the effort put out there. I think the town responded well, and I just appreciate everybody's effort. Thank you.
Thanks. Paul, do you have anything?
Yeah, I'd like to ask everyone who's listening if they know of any neighbor or relative who is suffering any hardship as a result of the hurricane, to please contact the Selectmen's Office, and we'll make sure that they get directed to an office that can help them.
Okay, thanks, Paul. And I'll echo Steve. The readiness by our team for this storm was impeccable, and we're ready. Even the trees that fell, we didn't have to wait for National Grid. The highway department was out in force, anticipating it, moving things out of the way, keep people going. So I want to thank everybody, all of our departments, for being ready to answer the call. All right, departments. Jeff?
I think I'm all set.
Okay, Dean?
Just a real quick reminder, Hazardous Waste Day starts September 1st. And I got some pamphlets here. Hey, you're the one who wanted this.
Why are you gonna be like that?
Thank you, Dean.
And I finally got it, so.
Awesome job.
Thank you, Chief.
Awesome.
And the other thing, I don't think the storm last week garnered enough attention. It was a lot worse last week than it
Oh, yeah, it
was.
The water. Oof.
The town had a lot of water issues last week.
Agreed.
Chief, and I was talking to someone who said they drove by when you were out in the waders trying to get that car out in front of the fire station.
Pulled 3 cars out.
Yeah, this girl, she said she couldn't believe people were going past you folks when you guys were out there trying to pull a car out,
Yeah.
creating wakes.
So note to everybody, when you see water like that, don't drive through it.
Yeah, it's like a
Steve.
no-wake zone.
Reminder?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just quick, we had, it was really good work by Fire, Highway, our guys, and everybody else that was involved. Good communication. We thank our grid representative, too. It's nice to have those people at the ready that you can get updates for in real time. And so things have worked out well. So I think it was probably somewhere around 40 or 45 different reports of trees, poles, and other damage that took place. Then we added a domestic arrest in the midst of it, so just to kind of top off the day makes it feel a lot of fun. Just one other thing that we'll be doing, I attended a training session last week on a lot of the reforms that are taking place. So I'll be submitting our application for accreditation to the state, because one of the requirements now is going to be certifying agencies. And so the part of that process is believed to be the accreditation process. We had tried that years ago, and it was kind of a daunting task at that point. So the fortunate thing is, with having a new lieutenant's position coming into play, we'll have some people be able to designate to kind of oversee that whole process as it goes forward. There's at least enough agencies our size out there that have done these processes over the time, so there's some good models out there that we can use, but that's just something we'll be working on over the next year or so. All right? But thank you very much.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. George? Rich?
Oh, George.
Oh,
Mason Road, lot of heat at the Selectmen's office. We have nothing to do with it. Sorry.
I have nothing to do with it either, except the fact that you don't expect 4 inches of rain in an hour's time, or whatever it is. I mean, it's gonna do damage to any road. That's the project. The project is almost 3/4 done now. But, and I did have them pave it up to a certain point before the so-called hurricane came through. But that's still not gonna help very much. We're still in the midst of putting services, still in the midst of tying ins on side streets. Certain areas can't be done yet till other areas are done due to the way the tie-ins to the system are. I can say that during the rainstorm, which was the worst of it, I was coming back from a hospital, and I had the contractor immediately bring his guys out from Ludlow and get down to the area, and I met them there with my crew, and we ended up trying to clean the place up, including West Main Street and everything. So I think we got it done in about a couple hours. And we try to respond to everything we can to if any complaints. Some of those ruts aren't always ours, because National Grid's been working in there too, along with another contractor doing some tie-ins up Mason Road. So you've got 3 different agencies performing work there, and we just never expected to get belted by rain like this. But we did respond pretty quickly and got everything back under control once everything settled down a little bit. So I can just say we'll try to fill in what we can, but once you fill something in, it ends up coming back out again. Depends on the type of trench it is that's up there. But we're monitoring it very closely as much as we can, trying to appease everybody. And hopefully it'll be done within a couple of weeks. Everything will be somewhat normal.
So George, can your admin work put it on our town Facebook page or like Twitter? Because like Michelle had a guy at the window today hopping on 1 foot at Jeff. So just, can they put the message out there that the work's coming? It is gonna get, I know it's gonna get fixed. We talked about this 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand. People know the road is being worked on, and a lot of them still want to drive it. Maybe they think it's easy to get that way, but my recommendation, if you don't have to use Mason Road, don't use it. If you got a nice car or anything, just go around until we can get everything under control. I mean, we just try to tell everybody that we're trying our best to maintain the road, integrity, but this weather has just not been the type of weather we're normally used to seeing, so it's put us in this kind of predicament. But yeah, we'll see if we can drum something up that, I mean, please try to avoid it. Please understand that we're doing what we can do, but certain areas just cannot be fixed or paved over until other areas are done to make a complete line. And we're also fighting the school system now that's going to be coming in pretty soon. And that's why we're the way we are, because we're trying not to make another mess of trouble and delay something when we're trying to get that whole section done. But yeah, I'll try to see what we can do to
All right,
get
thanks.
the information out.
Thanks, George.
Just wanna get the word out.
Yep.
Scott.
Okay,
Excuse me, just a second.
Scott,
I just
sorry.
wanted to add on to that. During that heavy storm and that water, after that contractor got finished cleaning up the area that he needed to get cleaned up, they spent a couple of hours with their equipment helping to deal with flooding with a couple of residents in that area as well. Stuff they didn't have to do. I was talking to one of the bosses, and he didn't want me to say anything, but I felt it was appropriate to say that they spent a lot of their own time after the fact, after dealing with the cleanup, helping to deal with flooding, along with he was working side by side with a couple of firefighters, pumping significant amount of water out of people's basements. At least one person's basement, but I believe there were a couple of them.
Oh, thank you, that was very.
Yeah, thanks.
Just to let it, that they were aware of the issues and they were there to help.
Okay, thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
John, anything? No? Okay, number 10, someone want to lead us into executive session?
Mr. Chairman, I
Gary?
make a motion that we convene into executive session under MGL Chapter 38, subsection 21A6, to consider the value of real property as the chair now declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the town. Stevens Mills redevelopment project, Carolyn Murphy, and not to reconvene into public session. And also to convene under Mass General Law, Chapter 38, subsection 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining session or contract negotiations with non-union personnel, lieutenant position job description. And finally, to convene under Mass General Law 30A subsection 21A3 to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. Police grievance.
Motion by Mr. Sigenovich. Second by Mr. Sullivan. Roll call vote.
Carrie Sigenovich, aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Paul?
Paul Joseph, aye.
John Marcy, aye, unanimous. Thank you, everybody. Good night.